Okay, everybody ready? Some fun stuff. We're going to do completing the square. You might get your calculators out. There's one part of this where you'll want that. Okay, first section of Module 7, Parabola Features. By the way, if you're just starting Module 6 today, that's perfectly fine. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. Module 7, I don't think is due until, I'd have to double check, but I think it's November 18th or something like that. So a little while before that one's due. Parabolas are U-shaped graphs. Sometimes those U's are opening up. Sometimes the U is opening down. And you'll be asked to determine the coordinates of the vertex. Ooh. The second one you might flip upside down. Some of them are open up, some of them are open down. So the vertex, that's just either the lowest point if it's opening up, or it's the highest point if it's opening down. So on the left one, that's going to be that dot there. On the right one, it's going to be the dot there. When you're looking at these on a graph, that point should be pretty obvious. You're just going to have to basically identify that point or this point here, depending on the graph. So it should be pretty easy. You know, you've got these grids. You don't have to draw this, but if it, you know, if that point is right there, let me zoom in on that. If that point's right there, let's say, I'm just going to give, for example, we'll say that's -2, 3. As long as, I'm assuming everybody knows how to not plot a point, but identify what a point is. So assuming everybody knows how to do that, this should be pretty easy. Just recognize the vertex is that top point or it's the bottom point, the lowest or the highest point. And then you just have to tell them what that grid point is. So if anybody is not 100% confident with that, I can come around and help you guys when you get into it. So put that on there. Maybe that's -2, 3. So that section should hopefully be pretty easy for you. Next, find complete the square constant. And the instructions will say which number completes the square. Which number completes the square? So a couple of things that you'll want to do on this one. You'll want to isolate the x's. So let me write that. Isolate the x's. So if I'm highlighting the x's, that's this term. That's also this term. So if we want to isolate those, that means we need to get rid of this negative 14. How are we going to do that? Add 14. The first step, hopefully pretty easy. Next, we're going to have, well, let me do it like this. Have, then square the coefficient of x. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Have, then square the coefficient of x. Have, H-A-L-V-E, have, then square the coefficient of x. So what's the coefficient of x? Close. Negative 11. Coefficient of x is negative 11. So when I say have, that just means we're going to divide it by, you can probably guess, divide by 2. So that's going to be 11 or negative 11 divided by 2. So that's the halving. Then we want to square it. Have it, then square it. Anybody know negative 11 squared? 121. And then what would be on bottom there? 4. 2 squared, 4. Okay. So the top number squared, bottom number squared, we get 121 over 4. So if we go back up to this question here, which number completes the square? Really all they're wanting is this. We don't do that, that's it, it's done. That's it. That's not the entire process. The way the section will work is they'll give you kind of like the first step in the process, and then the next section will be the next step in the process, and then when we get to the third and the fourth section here, we'll do the entire thing all at once. So otherwise, this might seem kind of overwhelming, but the first step is just get the x's by themselves, the x squared and the negative 11x, and then have and square. So I'll just stop there, but we'll do a couple more of these. And then what we would do if we were completing the process is we take this thing, we'd add it on the left there, and we'd add it to the 14 also. So we'd be adding it on the left and the right side of the equals. But for now, this is just the answer. Going to do the same thing here, so I'm not going to say as much. X squared plus 7x minus 27 equals 0. So first isolate the x's, second we're gonna have then square. Okay. So what number are we having and squaring here? 7. Having it. And by the way, if it was a number like 10, 10 over 2 is just 5. And then you square it and you get 25. So you won't always have a top and bottom. But number like 7 doesn't divide by 2 as nicely as 10 does. So we just leave it as 7 over 2 and then square it. So our answer on this one, what number's on top? 49. 49 and then 4. So this isn't the whole process of completing the square. It's just the first step. And by the way, this stuff on the left here, that's only important for the process. When we get to the ultimate process, we've already practiced it a little bit. Complete the square part 1 of the method. The instructions will say, what is the intermediate step in the form x plus a squared equals b? You don't have to worry about making sense of that statement right now, but that's what the directions will say. What is the intermediate step in the form x plus a squared equals b?
The a is that's your variable, right?
Well, you'll get a look at it here in just a second. So that first step, you guys remember what that was? Isolate x's. What is the intermediate step in the form x plus a? You don't have to worry about that so much. Just know that that's what they're going to be asking. So isolate the x's. So that means we want to get that x squared and then the negative 16x on the same side. So if we're going to move that negative 16x over, got to add it. So we're going to have it and then what? Square, which number? 16. Coefficient of x, which is 16 here. So the coefficient of x. So 16 divided by 2, that's the halving. This comes out nicely, unlike the 7 and I forget what the first number was, 11. So this is 8. So have it, then square it. 8 squared? 64. Be careful you don't do 16. I see that a lot. So on the last section, we'd stop there. 64 was our answer. But when we're completing the square, 64 is what we're going to add to both sides. Not coefficient of 4x, that's just of. Coefficient of x. Sorry, my handwriting's not the most legible. But the 64, we're going to add that to both sides. So I'm going to rewrite this: x squared plus 16x plus 64 equals negative 37. And then plus what? 64. Just checking. So adding that to both sides. And you can always do that with an equation. As long as you do something to the left and then you repeat it on the right, you haven't changed what the solution is, keeping it balanced. So on the right, negative 37 plus 64, is that 27? And on the left, so I'm going to show you something here that you might not necessarily do. There's some shortcuts that you can take. So feel free to write this down. This is really just so you understand how we get to where we get. But you probably remember that we've been doing some factoring. What goes first in those parentheses? X. And then we've got plus and plus, so we can put those there. And then you need two things that multiply to be 64 and then add to 16. Multiply to 64, add to 16. 8 and 8 multiplies to 64, also adds to 16. So you'll end up with these identical parentheses. X plus 8 times x plus 8, we could write as just x plus 8 in parentheses squared equals 27. So the shortcut, though, is you do need the 64 because you have to add the 64 to the right side. Let me zoom in just a little bit. We do need the 64 because we're adding it to the right side. But if you want to jump from this step to the parentheses squared, this is the part that you'll be asked to fill in this section. This part and then the right part. The way it always works is this number, the half number, ends up being what's in the parentheses. So on the previous one, if we were, let me go back just a little bit. If we were assuming what this parentheses is going to be, it'd be x plus 7/2, the halved. 7/2 is 7/2 is half of 7. 8 is half of 16. On the first one, if I go back to that, if we were to, do this one, it'd be x plus what? Actually, no. Yeah, negative 11/2. Okay, so a little bit of a shortcut. So still not completely done, but at this point, this is all they're going to want you to enter. So let me highlight all this. This and this are going to be the answers that you put in. We'll do another one of those. X squared minus 20x equals negative 2x minus 80. Isolate the x's. What would that first step be? Plus 2x. Yeah, we want to get all the x's on the same side. So plus 2x. I'm going to put that underneath the 20x since they're like terms. So we got x squared, negative 20 plus 2, negative 18. And then we've got negative 80 on the right. Halved and squared, which number? Negative 18. So negative 18, let me do that in a different color. Negative 18, we're gonna have it, and that comes out to negative 9. You know, the ones when it's 7/2, again, that doesn't come out nicely, so we just leave it as a fraction. This one comes out nicely, so we do want to know what that number is. Negative 18/2 is negative 9. Gonna square that. Negative 9 squared, 81. So this, technically we add to both sides. So I'm just gonna do the right for now though. Negative 80 plus 81. And if you remember how we did it on the last one, it was gonna be x minus, you guys remember this? 9. This half number, and we could do it in between where we do x squared minus 18x plus 81 and then factor that. But if you can remember this, if your notes are clear enough, you should be able to skip that step. So ultimately we end up with x minus 9 squared equals 1, which is the negative 80 plus 81. Negative 80 plus 81 is that 1. If you've actually, I don't think this would be a bad section for you guys to start working on in class today. Just in case you have some questions, I can help you while you're here. Okay, so adding something else to it. Negative 3x squared minus 24x minus 13 equals negative 13. Same process. I'm just going to add a little wrinkle to the process on this one. Isolate the x's. So we got the negative 3x squared, we got the negative 24 and the 13 we want to get rid of. Add 13. And then we've got negative 3x squared minus 24x equals 0. If you don't have anything on the right side, you do have to put a 0 there. So a little point on this one. If, hopefully I don't lose you with all these words, but if the coefficient of x squared isn't 1, divide everything by it. So if the coefficient of x squared isn't 1, on all the examples we've looked at so far, it was just x squared at the beginning, x squared at the beginning, x squared at the beginning. But on this one, we have negative 3 at the beginning. So if you've got something in front of x squared that is not 1, you're going to divide everything by that number. So here we're going to divide everything by what? Close. Negative 3. So let me highlight that number in front of x squared is not 1. So we're going to divide everything by that. And then after we do that, the process is just the same. So negative 3 divided by negative 3 is just 1. So now we've got 1x squared. And then we're doing negative 24 divided by negative 3. Negative divided by negative is going to be positive. Yep. 24/3, just 8. And then 0 divided by anything is just 0. But make sure you divide every term by negative 3.
The other ones we did in the same category.
Yeah, to be honest, not a lot of, there's different ways to solve a quadratic equation. This is generally, Try to take it as a challenge, but this is usually the one people like the least. Okay, so we isolated the x's. Then we're going to have them square, so 8 over 2 is 4. Then we're going to square it, 16. So I'm gonna skip that step here. This is going to be x plus, what number is going to go inside that parentheses? 4, the halved one. And then on the right, we've got 0 plus 16. Oh, and by the way, that should be squared.
You just added that the x plus 4 should be squared, but when we write our answer, it's only x plus 4.
Yeah, they'll already have the parentheses squared equal. So you'll have a box inside the parentheses and then a box on the other side of the equals.
Okay.
So the only thing you'll have to put in is this x plus 4 and then the 16.
That it's there, but when we answer the question, it'll have a format allowing you to just insert that.
Right, and this is not finished, by the way. So all this stuff is important. The last step is not really that bad. When we finish it, it won't. Okay, and let's do one more of those. Negative 5x squared minus 114 equals 50x minus 9.
You said that last problem isn't finished?
Well, the process of completing the square isn't done, but that answer, they just want, there's some of these sections where they don't take you entirely the way through the process. They stop about halfway through and make sure you can do that. And then it goes a little bit further and a little bit further. So for this one, part of the way through, and that's just what they want. Isolate the x's. Here we could do 2 steps at once because we need to move the 50x to the left. We also need to move that negative 114 to the right. Okay, any questions about that? I did 2 steps at once, basically. We moved the 50x left. And since we don't want any numbers on the left, we just want x's on the left. Move the 114 over. So now we've got negative 5x squared minus 50x equals 105. Thank you. And then I want to emphasize, if the number in front of x squared isn't 1, when we're completing the square, we're going to divide everything by negative 5. Divide the coefficient of x squared. X squared, then we've got negative 50 divided by 5, negative 5 rather. So that's going to be positive 50 over 5. And then 105 over negative 5, negative 21. Let me know if there's any questions.
So the 25 to the 5, the x plus 5 squared is where that 25 is on the other side.
On the left, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, technically there's an in-between step where we do x squared plus, or where we 10x plus 25.
Okay.
And then if you were to factor that, you'd end up with x plus 5 times x plus 5, which turns into x plus 5 squared. So we're sort of skipping a couple steps to end up with the
Oh,
parentheses. And I explained it before because I thought maybe people would want to know how we end up with this parentheses squared. But as long as you remember that we're just putting in the putting in this in the parentheses and then adding this to the right, then you should be able to get the answer just fine. Okay, so that's it for that one. And then now we'll complete the square completely. Complete the square, rational only. The rational only means that we're going to end up with a whole number. We won't have anything like an answer where it's 5.3782. There won't be any decimal parts of it. It'll just be a whole number. Okay, so I'm not going to say very much at the beginning because we've been through these steps a few times. X plus what? I think I heard somebody say X plus what? 3. We just want the half number goes in there. So half number inside the parent. Oh, that should be squared, by the way. Half number in the parentheses squared. On the right, we're adding the 9. Okay, and this is a new step here. This is the last step. We're going to square root both sides. Well, we did add the 9 to both sides, but I just didn't show it on the left because you would end up with x squared plus 6x plus 9. So if you can imagine that trinomial, x squared plus 6x plus 9, that would factor into 2 identical parentheses, x plus 3 times x plus 3. So, but like I said, that was, I just explained that so anybody was interested in how we ended up here. But adding it on the left, you don't necessarily need to show. So square root both sides. And what happens, I'm gonna zoom in on this part of it. If you square something and then square root it, you've basically done nothing. It's like adding 2 and then subtracting 2. What happens is the squaring and the square root negate each other and they just disappear. Just like adding 2, subtracting 2, both of them might as well not even be there.
So that's x plus 3 equals 5.
5, and technically it's plus or minus 5, although I'll need to double check with the software if they want you to do both.
Why would you have the option? plus or minus.
I'll leave it like this, and then I'll go into the software in a minute and make sure they don't, because technically there's two different answers. But they may just want one. So I'll double check that here in a bit. What would we do next here? Let me, before we do any more of these, let me double check that really quick. Okay, so let's go back just a little bit. So next to this square root both sides, you might put a plus or minus, just like that. Because when you square root both sides, you should end up with two different answers, a positive version and a negative version of the answer. So I'm going to put that next to this 5 here. So what that means is x plus 3 is equal to 5. Also, x plus 3 is equal to negative 5. And I'm going to write that both ways. Okay, so anytime you square root both sides, you're going to have both positive and a negative answer there. And then you're just going to subtract 3 on the left, subtract 3 on the right.
What was that step again?
You continued on. And then you continued on.
We'll do another one. X squared minus 2x equals 15. What's 1 squared? 1. I see a lot of 2's on there, so be careful. 1 squared is 1 times 1, which is 1. Okay, so the half number, when you have it, that goes inside the parentheses squared. And whatever number you square and get, that adds to the number on the right.
-2 divided by 2.
Oh, that is -2. Thank you. Still +1 on the right, -1 times -1, +1. Then square root both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. So square root the left, square root the right. What happens on the left? 2's gone, square root's gone. Plus or minus what? 4. Square root of 16 is 4. Okay, so then I'm going to write this twice. I'm going to write x minus 1 equals positive 4, x minus 1 equals negative 4. Anybody want to see one more of those? Well, we've got more to do. We've got another section, but okay, we'll go to the next one then. It's the same process, it's just irrational answers now. Hey, I thought you were the one that was excited about learning today.
So you put that on the screen.
Oh, actually, this one's irrational. Irrational, like I said before, rational is where you've got a nice whole number. Like, you know, we had 4 that we were adding to. We had 5 that we were adding to. Irrational solutions here will have some decimal answers. X squared plus 8x minus 3 equals 0. X squared plus 8x minus 3 equals 0. Square root both sides. Don't forget the plus and minus. The square and the square root disappear. So on the ones that we had before, we had the square root of 25, which is 5. We had the square root of 16, which is 4. Those came out nicely. The square root of 19 doesn't come out nicely. We'll just leave it as the square root of 19 for now. And let me write that. Well, I'll just leave it. I'll just write it like it. Doesn't come out like square root of 25. Square root of 25 would be nice. We could just write 5. Square root of 16, we could just write 4. Square root of 100, we could just write 10. Square root of 19, some long decimal answer. Here we're going to get x by itself. So we're going to subtract 4. And I'm going to say underneath the get x by itself, we're going to put number in front of the plus or minus here. Put number in front of the plus or minus. So we've got x equals -4 plus or minus square root of 19. That's subtracting 4. You can't do the 19 minus 4 because they're not like terms. One's a square root, one's a whole number. Yeah, and you should just be able to enter this in. That's the answer. Any questions on any of these steps here?
Get x by itself.
Get x by itself, put the number in front of the plus or minus. Okay, we'll do one more of these and then I'll let you guys work on whatever you have to work on. X squared minus 16x plus 62 equals 0. So again, if it was the square root of 4, we know what that is. If it's the square root of 25, we know what that is. Square root of 16, we know what that is. Square root of 2, that would be some kind of decimal we'd have to approximate. We'll just go ahead and leave it as a radical. And what's the last step? Add 8. and then done. So I know it's a scary process. Like I said, I'm not surprised you guys are not big fans of it. This is the one people like the least, but hopefully you follow your notes in the process well enough to duplicate it when you're doing the homework. All right.
I almost got ahead of you a little bit there.
Nice.
You know, we did it enough time to follow along.